Hello again, fellow editors. Welcome back to the final part 3 of this special masterclass on how to set up your film, how to organize your film and set up your project with me, Paddy Bird, the founder of Inside the Edit, and in partnership with our good friends over at Adobe. So if you haven't already watched the first 2 parts, check them out. We covered a whole load of very, very in-depth theory, which I'll just touch on here. And it's exceptionally useful to have. I would always say essential, really, but incredibly useful to start thinking about all of this footage in such a fragmented way. We want to compartmentalize and split everything up so that we can organize and maximize the time for creativity. So in part 1, we looked at the bin structure. You know, what are the kind of bins that we're looking at? How are we subsectioning all of these different types of footage and things like that. In part 2, we went even deeper and we started looking at how do we actually take all this footage, like the footage that we worked on, that I was working on this particular project. That was 35 hours. That's a lot of interview. That's a lot of actuality. That's a lot of B-roll. You know, that's thousands and thousands and thousands of shots and thousands of lines of dialogue. You know, we have to break those down so that we compartmentalize them in our mind and in our project. So we looked at, you know, going through the interview and pulling out using subclips. We looked at cutting up B-roll on the timeline, cutting out all the stuff that's not great, not aesthetically pleasing to us and stuff like that. And we looked at more of the kind of the beginnings of the creativity, which was, you know, we're psychologically evaluating our characters as well. How do they behave? How fast do they talk? And all that kind of stuff. It was really, really interesting stuff. And, you know, we are armchair psychologists. That's one aspect to what we do. You know, we tell stories and we build interesting sequences, but we're designing behavior, and behavior comes, you know, a scene is a set of events and a set of behaviors and emotional reactions. So the more we can get good at that, the better editors we're going to be. So this whole idea of like analyzing footage, the primary and secondary effects, the kind of the good side effects of breaking down all this footage, it's immense. It's immense. It really does set us in good stead, certainly in longer form, but you know, in any genre really. So you know, we're telling a story, and in order to tell a story, we need to know all the component parts and draw on them very, very quickly. So for this final part today, we're going to look at, you know, we looked at, you know, structure and organization within the project folder and how we kind of organize everything. Remember, we're kind of creating a digital filing cabinet for easy access, but it's just as important to do it on the timeline as well. So, you know, if you ever checked out on, you know, social media, sometimes big feature film editors, they post their timelines and you can see the hundreds and, well, not hundreds, but definitely dozens of tracks, of video tracks and audio tracks, and it looks very complicated and all assigned colors. And so we're going to take a look at that today, and talk about why it's so important. Good housekeeping on the timeline is incredibly important. So we want to be, again, it's all geared towards the whole of the stuff that we're talking about here. This is another layer of being geared towards speed and not robbing time away from creativity. Because the more we're messing around on the timeline and we're like, oh, what track's that? What track's this? We're stealing time away from creativity, and we've only got so much time. So we want to maximize that time. So let's start looking. I've got a sequence here, and let's start looking at essentially how I have structured this on the timeline. So this is a very common thing for me. You know, we looked at all the things on the bin structures and the pulling everything out and subclipping and stuff like that. But when we're actually coming time to start designing rough cuts of a sequence, we want the different elements to go on different tracks. Now, I've even color coded them here. Some people don't bother with that. Some people love doing that. But all of this stuff, all of these tools within Adobe Premiere will allow us to do this so that we are organized, as organized here on the timeline as we are organized here. So let's just watch this sequence through. It's a cute little sequence. It's about Tony, our photographer, who's getting up at dawn and describing what it's like to photograph in Venice, Italy. It's only, it's like a minute and a bit or something.
Yeah, each city does have its own character. Venice has that personality of just being really old and very serene and very beautiful because of the type of city it is. It's a waterway city. I'd never had an idea of what the cities were and what their personalities were until I walked the streets for a few weeks, and kind of discovered for myself. It's 6:30 a.m. in Venice. We're at the Basilica Salute. It's a very beautiful example of Baroque architecture. And it's colder than it was yesterday. You can see the flashes popping in San Marcos. A herd of light monkeys. Einstein called photographers light monkeys. I wonder if he meant that just for paparazzis or all photographers in general.
Okay, so there we go. Cute little sequence, rough cut. There's probably quite a few things I'd change to it, but it's good enough to show to a director and say, "What do you think? Am I on the right lines? This is what you envisaged." So I'm satisfied with this. But what's more interesting for us on this session is looking at, first of all, identifying and splitting up all of the different track elements. So let's look at this first. First of all, let me turn off. So on V2, I have all of my B-roll. So I've put all of my B-roll on V2. I've actually colored it as well. So I've colored it blue. And I've put the associated audio from the B-roll on A3 and 4. So whenever I bring a clip in, I'll just allocate the tracks up there, and put the corresponding tracks up there. Now, there's a very specific reason for this, and we'll go into that in a bit, but let's just identify the rest. Obviously, you can see that all of the interview, all of Tony's dialogue is going on V1 and A1 and 2. 2 tracks of audio, 1 track of video. So let's just turn off this track. And you'll see actually that the interview, I've stolen it from a few different types of locations, which is very, very common, obviously. So we're hiding stuff with B-roll. But this was actually shot in Paris, this behind the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower's just behind there. In front of the Eiffel Tower. So behind that tree there. It's round the other side there. But the Trocadero is behind that tree. Beautiful cinematic city to film in. But you'll see that I've put in all of these pieces of dialogue, interview dialogue, and more kind of on-location dialogue as well. I've put them all in pink. So I know immediately what's going on and where. So it's very easy for me to pick stuff up and go, okay, I'm not happy with the position of that, or that's too much, or whatever. So immediately I have this kind of grid, this X and Y axis grid on the timeline, whereby I can immediately look and associate different tracks with different types of content. And of course, on 5 and 6, A5 and 6, I just have the music coming in. So if I solo these two, and that's obviously mixing up and down based on when his voice is coming in. So, I mean, you can obviously turn the tracks, whatever color you want as well. I don't know. That might be a bit much, but anyway, you can see. This is easy identification. Now, this is very, very handy. One of the reasons we do this, let's go back to what we're talking about here. First of all, it's really good for identification. So you know what track is where, what content is on each track. And that really simplifies, that creates a kind of visual grammar for us that we get into, and we get very tidy and very kind of organized on the timeline so we can start moving around. I've seen timelines. Sometimes, when you're a professional editor and you're doing some big job, I've done a lot of big documentaries and feature docs and reality shows and all that kind of stuff and drama docs. And you're working on those things for months. But then in between those, you would have like a week or two off, and maybe your agent will say, do you want to do some fixing? And, you'll just go in on an edit that's overrun, and you'll just help out because maybe the editor's gone off for another job and they just need to finish the final week. And sometimes you go in, and especially with newer editors, the timeline is an absolute mess. It's all over the shop. So there's B-roll on V3 and dialogue on V2 and A4, and all the audio's associated all over the place. And it can take a long time. It really impedes creativity. It gets in the way of creativity because I'm trying to sit there and figure out match framing back and forth. What is what? It takes me ages. So therefore, it's stealing time from creativity. So it's a really important thing to take on board. It's a habit to get into all the time. Track laying. I remember I was on one of the first jobs I ever did, like when I was a young, like a teenager or something like that. First freelance job where I was about 20 or 21 or something for a TV show, daytime TV show. And I didn't do that. And the online editor came into the room and he was like, we're up against the deadline broadcast. You have to track lay. Otherwise, I won't be able to get this out to, 5 million people at 7 o'clock tonight. So that was kind of burned in my brain from that moment. He was like, rah, 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 rah. He was very, very kind of aggressive about it because I was really standing in the way of him getting the broadcast deadline done. So it's really, really important. It can really help us. So it's important to get into that mindset straight away. And of course, the other thing, let's look at this association here between the B-roll and the sync. If the video's up here, so a lot of people do this. They put their B-roll down on this, they just cover it up. They just overlay it onto here and keep everything on V1. Now, that's okay until the director comes in and goes, actually, no, I want to move that around. Like, I want to move it there. So you're going to have to do a bit of work there. Or I want to move it there. I'm going to have to do a bit of work there or whatever. Let me just Command Z that. So essentially, the idea of putting your B-roll up onto V2 allows us to start moving it around in a non-destructive way. You can keep all your options open. If a character, a classic thing, I think Tony starts saying he's just a bit of a dead space around here and he starts saying and a lot. I want to cut those out, those and ers. All this big pauses or stuff like that. I might want to cut this chunk out here because it's just dead space and it just sounds, like a big pause. So if I want to do that, I want to start having the ability to putting that like that there, cutting that together, but also having the ability to, let me just turn off the magnet, to get comfortable with where the positioning of this shot is in a non-destructive way. So I want to keep my options open, which is really, really important. So this is a really interesting way of doing it. It's a very organized way of doing it. Is there any specific way that you should do it? No, there's lots of different logical ways to do it. You can keep, you can do the opposite if you want. You can do the dialogue on V2 and A3 and 4, as long as it's consistent. That's the most important thing, so that you know immediately when you're moving stuff around, because you will move stuff around when the director comes in or the client or producer or whatever and just starts moving around. Oh, no, I want to move this here or do that, or let's try this. Duplicate the sequence and you can start moving stuff around, but you want to do it in a way that is, you're absolutely clinical in what track is where. And, taking this even further, I've worked on a lot of things like science documentaries and historical documentaries and political documentaries. And you're dealing with a lot of archive. So I would associate maybe V3 or V4 with archive. I'd only put archive and make it maybe green on V4 or V3. Maybe I've had some graphics or stings or whatever. I would associate a track with that and a color so that I can look and immediately know what's going on and where I've got latitude to move, or if it's what kind of destructive nature I'm going to do to my timeline. So associating different tracks with different inputs, different source material, whether it's dialogue, you could do it on different camera angles, like reality TV shows, before multicam came out, we used to cut them all, on different layers, different camera angles on different tracks and stuff like that. Especially if you're doing stuff like drama as well, where there's a lot of retiming. So you wouldn't want to do a multicam edit on that because it's all about the repacing of the delivery from the performers. So just think logically in terms of what tracks are where you're associating them, being consistent and assigning a color, and this really, really helps. Really, really helps. So I hope this really, really helps. Let's just refresh the 3 different stages, the broader terms of organization in your project folder, your bin structure, your digital filing cabinet. That's incredibly important. The broad strokes of how you start associating bins. Maybe it's scenes, maybe it's sequences, maybe it's montages, whatever it is, or locations. It could be dependent on a scene structure or an arc of the film. You might be working for a broadcaster where it's split into 4 parts with advertising breaks and stuff like that. None of that stuff, there's no hard and fast rules about that, as long as you're consistent and you're organized. And not to forget that the whole point we're doing this is to not rob time from creativity. And then secondly, start cutting up your footage, whether it's on the timeline, go through. If you don't like it, if it's not aesthetically pleasing, if there's a mistake in it, if there's a focus pull, an exposure change that looks messy, anything. If there's duplicated versions of the same shot, the camera operator's done 5 different versions, you got to choose one, get rid of the others, get that footage down. And also start pulling out as well from your interview sync. So start creating, subclips, summarize what the character's saying, and then put a grade on it. Could be a color grade, like a little color on it. Could be, this is an A, B, or C. C's average, B's good, A is excellent, or asterisks that we looked at in part 2. But all of these things, and then finally what we did today was keeping absolute clinical organization on your timeline, assigning different elements to different tracks. And this is the best way to maximize creativity. If we get into this habit, it's a bit sticky at start. And you're like, I don't really want to do this. And it feels like you're going around the long kind of route to do something. It will become instinctual and reflexive very, very soon. And we will maximize, you'll definitely maximize your time for creativity. And therefore, your film will be better. The more time you spend on it creatively, the better it will be. The better it will be, the more you're going to get employed. It's as simple as that. So from great acorns, small acorns grow great big oak trees, as they say. So this is one of the fundamental things at the very, very start of any project. I hope you've enjoyed these sessions. We'll be along with another one again soon. But if you want to come and join us at Inside the Edit, just come on over to the site, www.insidetheedit.com. We are the most in-depth editing course in the industry. We're used by many of the big media companies and production companies, broadcasters, film schools and stuff like that. So check us out. And also we do a weekly podcast, Once Upon a Timeline, which is full of all kinds of free ideas on creativity, how you edit, how you interact with clients, how you build your career. So hopefully I'll see you there. Thanks for joining me and take care.